Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana. And we're here today with special guest, Elizabeth Carpenter-Song, who's here to share with us her new book, Families on the Edge: Experiences of Homelessness and Care in Rural New England. Did you know that those suffering from homelessness, especially in rural areas, are met with unique challenges? Well, today's show is going to address just that. Elizabeth Carpenter-Song is currently Research Associate Professor in the Department of Anthropology at Dartmouth College. Her works have been published in journals ranging from Ethos to Psychiatric Services to Journal of Social Distress and Homelessness. So welcome to the show, Dr. Elizabeth Carpenter-Song.
Thank you so much, Marianne. I'm absolutely delighted to be here.
Well, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this book. So, what even inspired you to start researching the topic of homelessness?
Well, Marianne, so I'm trained as a medical anthropologist, and so for your listeners here, what that means is that I have the enormous privilege and joy of spending my time out in the community with individuals and families, and through this work. I have the opportunity to learn about their experiences of illness, how they navigate through oftentimes very complex systems of healthcare and social services. And so, over the course of my career, that's taken shape in a variety of settings within the United States, focusing on a variety of issues. But issues related to mental health have often been really a core locus within this work. And so a lot of this work is really focused on, again, how people are interacting with systems of care, how they think about their own illness and suffering, and how that may or may not align with how professionals within mental health care view those types of problems. And so in this particular work that forms the core for the book, I really wanted to turn my attention to the experiences of families. And that was something that I've done in previous scholarship as well. I've always feel as though I've been drawn to working closely with families. And so, I had, at the suggestion of a colleague, really learned that some of the challenges that were facing individuals within our community were related to housing challenges, and that initially kind of came as a bit of a surprise to me, as it did to others within the community. And so I wanted to use the skills that I bring as an anthropologist into the space of really trying to learn about the everyday lived experiences of families who were impacted by homelessness and by housing insecurity within our community, to try to really understand and then be able to share their stories out to a broader audience in the service of hopefully improving their situation and being an advocate for them within the space of healthcare and social services.
So, I know we talked about housing. Are there other things that erode, like family stability?
Sure. So, I think first and foremost, it's really important for people to remember that when we're thinking about homelessness, this is primarily a housing problem. And that's something that within our region, as in other regions within the United States, we are really bumping up against a tremendous shortage of housing, and in particular of affordable housing within our region and within the US more broadly. And so I think that's really important to underline, is that homelessness is principally a housing problem. But we do also see the kind of intersection of that shortage of housing then bumping up against other challenges that people may face related to mental health, related to substance use, and also certainly related to their ability to have a living wage and to make their ways within and to be fully integrated within the community. And so many of those things come together to really erode stability for families over time. And so I talk about that as a process of fundamental insecurity within the book. And it really is the kind of constellation of mobility and insecurity that families are facing across these different domains of their experience, and the ways in which the having not having a stable foundation of a safe and affordable home then really can erode other areas of life for families as well.
So, when we deal with issues of mental health and addictions, how do we deal with that and also the topic of homelessness?
Sure. And so this is where I think leaning on what we know from the research becomes really important. And so there's a model that has been researched for quite a long time now called the housing first approach. And what used to happen is that for individuals who were challenged by mental health or by addiction concerns, what often was required of them prior to being able to be housed is that they would be in treatment for mental health or sober or in addiction services prior to their ability to be housed. And researchers really flipped that on its head with the housing first approach and said, let's try housing people first. And then, as people gain stability and as they gain trust with others within their community, provide the option for those types of services. And what we see in that body of research, some of which has been done within the region that I talk about here in Vermont, we see that people are able to maintain stable housing over time. And so I think that's an incredibly promising approach, and it's one that's really backed by the research evidence as well.
Has homelessness really increased over the last few years?
Yes, it has, and it's been exacerbated, particularly within our region. And I see this as I look nationally too by the pandemic.
And so is this something that from a probably a federal level that we need to take a look at, or state level, to help states really view this in a different way?
I think so, and I think this is where we need to see the. I'd like to see really the confluence of policy, of the necessary resources at the state and federal level, coming together with local and community-based approaches as well to tailor those things to the individual context and to the individual setting. But this is something where we really we're facing a crisis within the United States broadly. We can see this. This is something homelessness is being reported on a near daily basis as we look across our urban centers within the United States. We know that this is a huge challenge that we face for our country, and so this is something that we need to really think at scale about how we can bring together the political will and the resources coupled with the kind of local and creative input and approaches to be able to address this so that everyone can have a safe and affordable place to live.
Can you share with us a story of Abigail?
Absolutely. So Abigail was a young woman who I initially met when she was in residence at a family shelter that I call Safe Harbor. And this particular shelter is located in the state of Vermont, a very rural state. And she was 19 at the time that we met. She was raising two young children at the time. And she stayed at the shelter for many months as she searched for housing. And this was very common among the families with whom I worked, is that it would take them months in order to find a place to live. And that was reflective, of course, of the lack of housing stock that I spoke about earlier. And after a few months within Safe Harbor, Abigail was fortunate to be able to move into an apartment of her own. And she was even more fortunate in the sense that this was a subsidized apartment, which meant that her contribution to the rent was capped at 30% of her income, which really means that, and that's a federal definition of what it means to have an affordable place to live, is that not more than 30% of your income is going toward housing. And so this was a very promising situation for Abigail. It really seemed to me and to others that this was a real success story and a story of Abigail getting the supportive and compassionate services that she needed in the shelter setting. And then that set her on a path to be able to make this transition into the community and into an affordable place of her own. And initially, this was a very positive thing for Abigail. She spoke to me about how she enjoyed just the quiet and calm environment that she was in. She saw positive changes in her kids, that they were sleeping through the night. And, this marked the first time that she was living on her own with her kids. She had bounced around from in previous settings. And so this was quite a milestone for her. And then things began to subtly shift. So as I spent more and more time with Abigail in her apartment in the community, I began to notice that she was telling me more and more about feeling quite lonely. She was feeling very bored. She kind of missed the interactions and the friendships that she had had while she was at the Safe Harbor shelter. She would reminisce oftentimes about being able to wake up and have coffee with someone and to be in a supportive environment, to be in an environment where she could get some advice on raising her kids and just some support from others within the environment. And so a few months after she had moved into the apartment, she decided to make a move. And she moved in with her best friend and her friend's family. And this initially marked, in some ways, a positive move for Abigail. She was able to get some support with childcare. She was able to be surrounded by familiar people. I think that was a key point, that the apartment that she had been in was quite far away from her networks of kin, from her friends. And so I began to understand that she had felt incredibly isolated within her apartment, and that really propelled her to make the decision to leave. Over time, that situation with her friend's family deteriorated, which subsequently sparked then a cycle of continued housing mobility over the course of the next many years. And so what we can see is that when she made the decision to move, she gave up and she sacrificed her subsidized apartment. But if we look closely at her experiences, we can really understand that this was a decision that was informed by her deep desire to break out of the kind of grinding isolation that she was feeling as a young mom raising two kids more or less on her own, very far from her networks of support. And so this is something that, within the context of the book, I call on us to think about, looking deeply at these types of situations and really thinking about the ways in which, so I'm writing about rural settings in particular. In Abigail's case, she really highlights the way that social isolation coupled with geographic isolation came together to undermine what would have been otherwise, I think, a very successful transition for her into the community.
I just found her story to be so touching. And so is loneliness a real common issue that is coming up?
It is. And this is something that I heard again and again from many of the families with whom I worked. It's something that as people move to more remote communities in the rural environment, they're often very far from familiar people, familiar settings. They may be far away from the hubs of employment, from the hubs of shopping. And so this can really shape people's experiences in ways that erode their sense of security and stability. And of course, we know that this isn't unique to rural areas. I think in some ways, um, the geography and the geographic spread and isolation may amplify loneliness and isolation, but we see this reflected more broadly. The US Surgeon General, just within the last few months, had a report on what he termed the epidemic of loneliness that we face within the US now. And so I think, again, these are issues that I'm focusing quite specifically on experiences within rural New England. But I think these issues speak to much broader challenges that we face collectively within the US.
Do you think that since we went through the pandemic and we've had that, stage of loneliness for everybody or for a good deal of people, that this idea of loneliness for people with homelessness is something that's taken more seriously?
I hope so. I think that that's a really interesting point that you're making, that um, it's much harder to think about loneliness as something that other people face, right? Not me. I'm not lonely. Other people. I think we all experienced during the pandemic, as you're suggesting, that the tremendous disruptions to our usual social interactions, and we felt acutely the sense of loss that was associated with that during the pandemic. I hope that can set the stage then for more empathic approaches and more empathic interactions with those who continue to face this type of loneliness within our communities. I hope that our memories are long enough for that to inform our approaches currently.
We can develop some compassion for people going through this on different levels. And it has me kind of thinking, so with like Abigail's children, does there tend to be a cycle of poverty and homelessness or addiction when we look at what Abigail's going through with her children?
I think, I might push back against the idea of a cycle of poverty here. I think because all of the families with whom I worked and all of the parents with whom I worked were fiercely protective and supportive of their kids. And so this is something that, in the midst of living in situations of extreme scarcity, parents are engaged in a deep and daily struggle to do the best for their kids and really want their children to be able to not experience many of the challenges that they're experiencing. And so parents spoke directly to me about wanting their kids to get an education, that they were acutely aware of the tremendous challenges that they faced in the context of low wage work. And so I think parents are striving to support their children to be able to really overcome many of the challenges that they're facing currently. And so that, I think that would be something to bear in mind, is that I would worry that, or perhaps put another way, families who are surviving in poverty are working hard every day. And it's also the case that families who are surviving in poverty and who are on the edge are not a people set apart, but are, oftentimes, ascribing to and striving for the same values that we would see more broadly among families.
Well, on that note, we're going to pause here for a quick break. We've been speaking with Dr. Elizabeth Carpenter-Song in regards to her new book, Families on the Edge: Experiences of Homelessness and Care in Rural New England. We'll be right back after these messages from our sponsors.
Hi, this is Jana Wilson, author of Wise Little One, Learning to Love and Listen to My Inner Child, a best-selling prescriptive memoir in inner child healing. I'm also the founder of the Emotional Healing System. The inner child, simply put, is your feelings, both positive and negative. If you'd like to learn to love and listen to your wise little one, pick up my book at Amazon or visit my website at janawilson.com. It's never too late to have a happy childhood.
The first thing you need to know about me is that I love my kids, but they are not my everything. They used to be, but that's when my entire life fell apart. In order to pick back up the pieces, I had to put the love I have for myself before everything else, including my kids. I'm Jessica Dennehy, and I own multiple businesses. I'm a best-selling author, and I have all the strategies that I've used to make my life what it is today. And I'm going to teach you how to do them in my new book, Selfish is a Superpower. So go get your copy today on Barnes & Noble or jessicadennehy.com.
Announcing a revolutionary tool for wellness. Scalar Light has the ability to enhance and harmonize your own bioenergies. With Scalar Light, you can get started in just minutes and begin feeling better the very next day. Scalar Light is a remote energy that gently and subtly works with your own body's bioenergies, increases pro-cellular wellness, and enhances your body's immunity.
Experience the benefits of Scalar Light. Try a complimentary 15-day experience at scalarlight.com.
Are you ready to celebrate World Wellness Weekend on September 15, 16, and 17? Well, we are. 6,000 venues in 147 countries are organizing fun and free activities for you to enjoy with your friends, your family, your colleagues. Look on wellmap.org, WELLMAP.
In your hands lie ancestral patterns. These patterns shape how you think, what you struggle with, and experiences you love, your life pattern. We're going into the latest neuroscience of biological hand analysis, a realm beyond palmistry where science and the soul entwine. Hand analysis is the latest method to transform lifelong patterns. I am Master Hand Analyst Brent Bruning. Join us and visit thepowerinyourhands.com.
Looking for a page-turner? Cozy up to a fantasy adventure romance trilogy with The Girl in the Toile Wallpaper by Mary Kay Savarese. The second novel in the Star Writers trilogy, The Star Writers Club, is coming soon. Take the journey. Connect with Mary at www.maryksavarese.com. Her books are available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie bookstores.
With Breath Hub, you'll experience the transformative power of breath as it harmonizes your body, mind, and spirit. Recommended by experts in fitness, sports, psychology, and medicine. Meet the scientific way of being well. Breath Hub. Breathe better, live better.
Pandemonium. Fast forward 20 years. A U.S. president seizes control of all U.S. missiles, the power grid, the banking system, and every computer in America as he hides in an underground bunker. Pandemonium, a captivating sci-fi thriller where a hidden war, psychics, aliens, artificial intelligence, and transcendental love collide with the latest media technology. Pandemonium, live to all devices. Get your copy on paperback or digital. Free sample at getpsychic.org.
I'd like to thank Jason Eastwood at Guitarfulness for sharing his inspiring music and talent with us. His music is known worldwide for cultivating atmospheres of harmony, inner peace, and clarity. Visit Jason's website at guitarfulness.com. Join his newsletter, be part of his community, and download his music. Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. We're here today with Dr. Elizabeth Carpenter-Song in regards to her new book, Families on the Edge: Experiences of Homelessness and Care in Rural New England. Now, before I went for break, there's a point I really wanted to touch on. There's so many false narratives out there that surround homelessness. And I've even heard people say, well, they really want to be homeless, or they all have mental issues, or they have drug and alcohol addictions and they don't want to get clean. So when people are hearing the repetitions of these stories that are so untrue, how do they get beyond that?
That's exactly right. And I think that that's something that at the heart of what I'm trying to do in sharing the experiences that I have been gifted through my time with families. It's really to rehumanize our understandings of homelessness, and to invite people to think much more deeply about these issues. I think that it's tremendously cynical for the sorts of stigma and those stigmatizing narratives that are often so pervasive in terms of responses to homelessness really reflect a deep cynicism, and to some extent, I think, a lack of imagination about what can be done in order to compassionately support families. And so this work is really poised, and my hope is that this is a project where this is about rehumanizing responses to homelessness and countering that sense of inevitability, or that homelessness is an intractable, unsolvable problem. That is not the case, and the evidence shows this. And so with the adequate supports, and coupled with the deep tenacity of families, people absolutely can move into situations of greater security. And that's what we all should be working toward.
I agree with you on that 100%. And I learned so much from your book. One of the things I'd like to cover is what type of services are available? Is it like a one-size-fits-all, or are there services that can be really personalized for each family?
I think it's such a great question. I would really love for us to see much greater tailoring of services. It's something that is very difficult right now within the context of our current system of healthcare and social services. I have also deep empathy for providers who are working within what are oftentimes very challenging, I might even dare say quite broken systems themselves. And so we see a lot of things within the systems that are working against providers' ability to provide that really individualized care for the person in front of them. We see this reflected certainly in the time constraints that our providers are under. We all know when we go into a doctor's appointment, we maybe have 10 minutes or so with our providers. So we're seeing the time pressures. We're seeing our providers under tremendous productivity pressures, and then we also see, particularly on the social service side of things, we see caseloads within social services that are well beyond what would be the evidence-based standards. And so, again, it's important for us to have deep empathy for the challenges that mental health, healthcare, and social service providers are facing. That being said, that shouldn't prevent us from thinking about how we can do better and how we might design these systems to be better, and also to really keep as an aspiration that what you're suggesting in terms of highly individualized and tailored supports that really take into account the unique situations and the complexities of families. And this is something that we know that when we are under pressure ourselves, oftentimes we may not approach others with the most generous spirit. And so I think this is something that's incumbent upon us to really think about the ways in which we can help to support our healthcare and social service providers to come into interactions, thinking about every interaction as an opportunity to support the person in front of them, what can be done, to think creatively, and also to really look deeply beyond the challenges. I think that's something that, again, when we're feeling pressure ourselves, oftentimes that translates into perhaps much more of a deficit-based understanding of the person before us. I think it takes more care and it takes intention to be able to engage with and really seek to see the strengths in the person before us. And so that, to me, is one of the big calls that I make, is a kind of call to action for our healthcare professionals, for our social service providers, to really come into this work with a strengths-based perspective, and also to think about, at the level of, as we're training and educating the next generation of professionals who will enter into these spaces, how can we provide them with the skill sets that they'll need to address these very urgent, very complex, thorny issues? We know that this is going to go well beyond their standard book learning. And so what are the ways in which we can support our future professionals to be able to come into these situations with a deep understanding of some of the social determinants of health, with a deep understanding of how the people with whom they may be working are coming from traumatic circumstances and experiences. And so these are all part of some of the ways in which I see the need for necessary improvements and opportunities, really, for us, again, to work together in the service of thinking about how can we do better within this space? How can we better meet the needs of families who are living and surviving in poverty and on the edge like this?
Does transportation tend to be a major challenge?
Transportation is an enormous challenge. And this is one of the ways in which the fact that this work is taking place in a rural environment really matters. Unlike more urban or even suburban settings that have greater infrastructure for public transportation, the landscape here within our region of northern New England is set up as we are situated as a series of very small towns and villages, typically just a few thousand people in each of these town centers, and there's quite a bit of geographic spread between them. And so we remain quite car dependent within our communities, and for families that don't have the means for a vehicle, this becomes an incredible challenge for doing what needs to be done over the course of the day, and really limits and constrains options. People seek employment that's going to be much closer to their home. People often have a very difficult time accessing healthcare that they may need. Transportation is such a large challenge within our community. We're fortunate, and I write about this in the book, we're fortunate that some of the core towns in the region that I'm writing about are served by a free bus service. But this is limited, to by hours, oftentimes not running on the weekdays, and often not going to the more remote towns within our region. And so, while it's a terrific service, and that can't be, I certainly don't want to understate that. It's a very, very useful service for people, but it doesn't bridge the entire transportation gap within our community. And so this is something that continues to be a core challenge for us, and then needs to be considered when we think about possible solutions within the housing space as well. Transportation is a part of the equation.
I was really touched by your story of Jim in your book and his journey of going to food pantries.
Yes, so Jim shared with me one afternoon his 80-mile journey across several towns in order to access food for himself and his family, and also supplies that he needed for his dog as well. And so this 80-mile journey to get these types of supplies took him about 3 hours over the course of the day. And so just you can see just the tremendous challenge that this places on people in order to just get the basics that they need for their survival.
And 3 hours, and I mean, I just can't imagine that, and the amount of gas he goes through. It sounds like it's exhausting.
Exactly. And you can, yeah, absolutely. And again, just, thinking about, for any of us, then how that might impact other areas of our life, right? And how would you fit that in the context of trying to hold a job at the same time, or caring for kids at the same time? And so you can really begin to see how that transportation challenge and the way in which resources are oftentimes so spread out within our region really begins to impact other areas of families' lives as well.
So what needs to increase as far as opportunities for those who experience homelessness?
Well, first and foremost, within our region, we really need to see an increase in the development of housing across the spectrum. We have a housing shortage across the economic spectrum within our region. And this is particularly difficult when we think about affordable housing for people. And so a current report that came out in 2020 called Keys to the Valley within our region of northern New England noted that just within the central part of Vermont and New Hampshire that forms the core of the region that I'm talking about in the book called the Upper Valley, they said that we need to build 10,000 additional units of housing by 2030. And so this is a big hurdle for us that we face. We see that, again, pointing to some of the challenges that face us in rural communities in particular. Oftentimes, we do not have the infrastructure for larger congregate style housing, so larger apartment buildings, for example. In a rural area, many of us rely on private septic systems rather than large sewer systems. And so many of our towns lack that type of municipal infrastructure to support larger projects. We also see that we are having a tremendous, as in other areas of the country, we're having challenges related to labor shortages. And this is especially the case within the construction sphere. And so projects are, booking out years into the future. And so many of these things are compounding some of the challenges that face us in terms of development. That being said, I think that it's incredibly important for us to come together across and to really think about all of the different people who may need to be at the table as we think about supporting smart development within our communities. And this is something that it really will require the building of consensus across policy, across local town governing boards, across developers, across communities to come together to address this housing crisis. And so this is something that within the book, call for us to consider ways in which we can increase density closer to town centers to address some of the challenges that we spoke about in terms of transportation, but also to address some of the challenges that we face in terms of people's loneliness and isolation. And if we can think creatively about increasing density within our town centers, then that helps us toward what I think is our shared goal of also preserving what's special about this place, which is its rural nature. And so I'm hopeful that we can work towards solutions to address the housing crisis. This is something that I hope that the book is able to spark conversations, to move us in that direction, that it helps people to understand the scale of the challenge that we face. And really by, again, humanizing the face of homelessness to underscore the urgency of this for individuals and families within our community. These are our neighbors. These are our community members. And I'm hopeful that by sharing the stories in the book, I hope that this is an invitation to empathy for people within our community.
Now, is there a national model that we can look to that would help us get to this place where we can successfully deal with homelessness?
This is a challenge for us, certainly. I think we see across the U.S. right now how many communities are grappling with these challenges, and so I think it's important that we learn from each other and try to build on successes. I would say again that being guided by the research evidence is important here, and using models that are informed by a housing first approach is quite important as we think about supporting people who may be facing multiple challenges within our community. So I would hope that the approaches that we're using are guided by that as a philosophy and as an approach.
What would you like our listeners and readers to take away from your book, Families on the Edge?
That these are, I think, first and foremost, that the families that have so generously shared their experiences with me are striving for the best for their families amid terribly difficult conditions of economic precarity. And just like you and I, they want their best for their kids. They are actively working toward stability and security for their families. They care deeply about their kids. And so really to try to, and also that homelessness is not someone else's problem. This is something that we all bear responsibility within this space of thinking about how it is that we what can we do within the space and with our particular skill sets, with our particular talents, to begin to address this challenge. And as I said before, I think this is such a complex and such an urgent challenge that we face within the region I'm writing about, but more generally within the U.S., that this will require both community level responses as well as policy level responses in order to adequately meet the need at scale. But I think that I would hope that that by learning about the intimate, everyday lived experiences of families who are facing these enormous challenges, I really hope that people are able understand these issues through a human lens, and to see people as complex, as flawed in many ways, but as deeply human individuals who are striving to do the best for their kids and for their families. And so that's the reason why I have chosen to end the book the way that I do. And I say that I've chosen not to end it with a statement, but with a question. And so to compel reflection, but also action around the question of what can you do to create interactions and environments that destabilize stigma, promote compassion, and advocate for everyone, for equity. And this is something that I hope that we all feel a sense of responsibility to think deeply and then to act on that question through engagement with the book.
Well, Elizabeth, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you so much, Marianne. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Elizabeth Carpenter-Song. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, Families on the Edge: Experiences of Homelessness and Care in Rural New England. Families on the Edge is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and everywhere books are sold. And remember, support our indie bookstores. Make sure to purchase it from them if you can. You can also purchase this book directly from the publisher, MIT Press, at mitpress.mit.edu. I'd like to take a moment to express our deepest appreciation to all of our listeners spanning in over 100 countries. Your unwavering support and the incredible diversity you bring to the show enrich our broadcast in ways words cannot capture. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.